Right. This is Everyday Spirituality with Connect Faith. I'm here with Tabreeca Woodside, who's an amazing singer and has a lot to her journey to share with us about her spirituality and how it has come to be in her voice and how she's found herself in it. And also, you will recognize her voice because you've heard her sing with Connect Faith on many occasions. And also, she's been the host of our Creativity Lab. So we're really glad to have you here with us.
Glad to be here, Debbie.
Why don't we just start with talking about where your journey began, how you became aware that music is something that was going to feed your soul?
Yes, which is a very easy one for me because it started as a little girl. I've been singing. My earliest picture and song memory was from when I was 5. And I grew up in a musical family. So a lot of my environment was music. I'm the youngest of 7. So
Wow.
everyone were musicians. So I was encased in music. I mean, it was nothing other than music in our home. And so for me, I that was what I did. That's what I did in church. My dad was a pastor. My mom and dad being a part of church life, sang in choirs, sang solo, sang in school play. So it was my activity. I didn't know how to do sports. I didn't know how to do anything else but sing. So for me, um, because it was the rhythm of our home, there was nothing strange about it. So I didn't go to the mall, I didn't hang out. It was music, 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 music.
That's great. That's great. So then did you pursue that in school? Where did you go with music as you grew?
So throughout, like I said, through elementary school, I was in all of the plays and different events. And there was a thing on in Nassau County, because I'm from New York, a native of New York. And in Nassau County, it was called All County. And it was where they gathered, they chose students out of the different schools. So I was part of the elementary experience. And as I got older, I was able to do the middle school experience. And so for me, those kind of outlets, I went to a Catholic school and they were very involved in different events. And then I got to high school and it continued. Now, the high school is where I really began to expand my musicality because I went into an a cappella chorus.
Okay.
The a cappella chorus was amazing experience. That was the first time I got to travel and be in
Wow.
competitions and things like that. Because we were, a lot of the things I did were solo. I was that little girl that just did all the singing. But getting into an environment in high school where there were so many other uh, peer levels. And so I began to really expand my sound in a cappella music, jazz style, and all of these
Mm.
things came into place specifically in high school. So after high school was college, and I kind of felt like I defaulted into music because I wasn't really that good at anything else.
It was where your gifts were from the beginning, it
Right.
sounds like.
And
Yeah.
I'll be honest, that wasn't something that I thought was a real thing to do for me. I was
Mhm.
like, well, maybe I should get a regular job because I was the only one in my family that was doing music that much. I had a brother who was in the arts. I had a brother that was in um, I'm sorry, I keep touching these because that's just, I'm not used to using them. My brother that was in the arts, and I had another brother that was very heavy in sports. He went to the Final Four, LSU. And
Wow.
so I have a
Wow.
very active family, but I was the only one that music was my lane.
Yeah.
That was just it for me. And so by the time I got to college, I went to Five Towns College and I chose jazz, but it was challenging to really hone in on what my thing was.
Yeah.
And jazz was a slow development. It was a slow discovery. It was a over time understanding of what I sounded like and what brought me joy. What is that sound? And church was my thing, but I still didn't hone in on me. And so it was around college years that really began to expand into the solo sound of me.
So then I know that you've talked about how church has been such an important part of your life, and you kind
Yes.
of found God in different kinds of music, in
Right.
jazz and in music that some people think of as secular. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about how it is that you find God in music that maybe other people wouldn't notice.
Oh, yes. Thanks for asking that question, because I absolutely, that has been the joy of my life. That has been the joy of my journey, is in the discovery of the arts. Um, when I was a kid, I was very, it was a very strict Pentecostal family.
Mm.
So secular music wasn't something that was allowed. Um, However, I had these brothers that lived in a basement, and they had all styles of music. So I would hear things and able to that. I really didn't know what it was. And as I got older, it was my sister Charmise. She's almost 5 years older than me. She went off to college first, and I remember when she came back home, she had a shoebox full of mixtapes.
Ah,
Because I would try to sneak and listen to secular music. I grew up kind of like an only child, because being the youngest of seven, everybody was pretty much gone. So
okay.
if it wasn't on TV, I didn't touch it much. But then my sister went to college, and she had all of these mixtapes. So now I had R&B. I had, my first R&B purchase was Mary J. Blige in 90, I think that was 94, 90, no, actually a little bit before that, the first album. And so for me, um, she was the sound. It
Mm.
really, my connectivity came into through sound, not necessarily lyrics yet. Lyrics I was still nervous about, because I didn't want to go against God.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously in secular music, you are taught that the Christian labeled things are what God wants. And so once someone tells you that, you're working to not mess up. So you all of a sudden you start hearing these sounds and these rhythms, and it's like you're scared to inquire. It's like you're scared to go into that way, like, what is that? But you're drawn to it.
Yeah,
And
right.
so for many years you're being taught that you're drawn to the devil, as opposed to you're drawn to sounds.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
the
Interesting.
issue for me became, I'm so in love with this sound. People probably, the average person probably would have never asked me, what is the lyrics that you like? I didn't have an opinion on lyrics per se.
Okay.
And in some Christian experiences, that was poor management, I guess, of your faith in some ways. But for me, I just didn't feel, I just didn't feel like it was wrong, because it was so good.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the sound captured me first. And then lyrically, it was more the stories of my life, the things I heard of my friends, the things I heard of life. I started liking a boy, I started, I'm
Yeah.
watching TV, and I'm like, oh my God, I love that song on television. So it just began to be more of identifying with life, as
Right.
opposed to saying only God things can show you life.
And so then, did it kind of work the opposite way then? Did life things show you God?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, Debbie. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Largely due to the fact that you're going to live life with or without God. You are going to go into life in some form or fashion. That's not something you can stop from happening. That's the reality of breathing and living.
Right.
So that lyric is going to be lived out. No, no, either way, the lyric is going to be lived out. So I had to grow into the understanding that putting life to music is a part of God's plan.
Okay. Great. Great.
And it can be, again, you growing up where Jesus, saying God, referencing scripture, referencing, these God experiences and encounters are the only, approved outlet. But then you go and you live, and you wonder if you can walk down the street, and begin to talk about, I cross the street, I'm feeling that rhythm of life, or, you're now looking at life, you're looking at all these things, and you're so, captivated by it, that you want to put it to music. And that's what I'm listening to people do. They're putting these things to music, but they're not saying, I walk across the street because Jesus told me to, and I'm walking down the street and I'm feeling this way because God made me feel this way. That wasn't necessary in that
Ah,
style.
okay. It
You're
wasn't
like,
necessary because it's
he's in
already
it.
there. Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
in it.
Okay. Great.
And that's something that for me, I think it can be challenging when there is a particular religious um, dogma or mindset that tells you that you have to structure him this way.
Mhm.
And it really is a disservice to the freedom of him, the omnipotence of him, the exploration of his creation. And so many people I feel are challenged by, how do I reconcile my regular day? And can I just side and say this? The irony of it is that I have worked for a marriage ministry for 4 years, excuse me, and I watched these beautiful people go through counseling, and they would always say that you have to discover something about the person, and it would be like non-spiritual because you're not, that especially if you married a preacher, he's not preaching 24 hours a day. So what
Right.
do you love about him other than preaching? So here you are about to get married, and you have to separate the call from the person. Hello. So if you got to do that in marriage, then wouldn't that be some elements of that in just your daily life?
Yeah.
That there's pieces that aren't um, of a biblical, and I air quote it because based on what I'm discovering of God and what I've read in scripture, there's a wonderful word manipulation that happened to explore what you're experiencing as a human being. And some people are just better at expressing it without needing to get religious, practices involved.
Right.
And I just, for me, that's just been, I don't know if I went too far deep into it, but that's definitely something
No,
that
I'm
is
grateful.
constantly like this because I deal with it within myself. Even at the age of 45, I'm now still in a heavy discovery of how to be okay with how God expresses himself through me.
Through you. That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. So, how often do you practice your music? Do you sing all the time? I know sometimes you think about writing. Like, how is music working in your life today?
Today is a good word to use because it has evolved. Um, to be very specific, in the past few weeks, I have had like an emotional, some people say a come to Jesus moment.
Okay.
And for me, it's been more so like of a breakdown of I'm exhausted with expressing something that really isn't what I want to say.
Mm,
I'm struggling still with that. So I sat and I decided to write. I
okay.
wrote I wrote my feelings out. Do you mind if I read it to you?
I would love for you to read it too.
Okay. I sat up and I challenged myself, as we have discussed with other artists. Like I was listening to the artist Sarah Caswell the other night, and
Yeah.
I felt like I needed to learn how to respect what it is that I hear and give it room to breathe, as she stated in her.
Yes. Yeah. Wasn't that
And
great?
so this is literally what came out. Without me thinking about it, I just started writing. And it doesn't have a title, but this is just I wrote. It started with a life of prophecy, a life of believing what I thought would be the dream, the God-given life. Did I do something wrong? Did I miss the mark? This is not what they said. This is hard when I go to bed. Will it happen the next day or the next? I find myself aging and waiting. What was it supposed to be? Every chapter, the prophecy changed. I must have been looking in the wrong direction. The story took longer. Now time doesn't feel like it's on my side. He never makes mistakes, that's what they say. Every day prearranged, that's what they say. So I keep trying over and over until it comes my way. This is not about disbelief or if my faith has increased. I just want to conceive what I was taught to believe.
Mm. Oh, that's beautiful, Teresa.
Thank
And
you.
so relatable. I think a lot of us get to a point where we think, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing?
Right.
Am I walking in the way that God wanted me to? Have I missed pieces, or have I missed parts of the story? That was really, really beautiful. And you're right, it does go with that whole sense of, okay, breathe, that Sarah was talking about.
Right.
Maybe it's right here, and we're running trying to catch it when it's already here, you know?
Right. And I appreciate you letting me read it because I wasn't going to. I was sitting there, I was like, I probably should share it. Because again, like you're saying, you never know who needed to hear or
Mm-hmm.
identify, or to just simply know that, that is a lot of people look at me because I've been a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
I am a minister in my church here in New York. And even in that, I'm working very much so to change what has been believed to be a minister. Someone
Okay.
thought, she's not preaching. What is she doing? And I was like, that's why I do what I do, to help expand the borders.
Yeah.
That's what I do to help change the status quo of what's accepted ministry, what's accepted God channels, what is accepted. Because the hard part is when God constantly talks to you about one thing. And if the religious environment doesn't accept that one thing, what do you do?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's just not fair I feel like a lot of people feel that sense of being trapped because
And
they're
so
trying to make it fit.
yeah. So you're trying to help people figure out how not to be trapped. And you're
Yeah,
kind of showing people with your life and your music that
right.
there's a different way. Yeah.
There is. And I don't despise, obviously, I'm so passionate about the foundation of my upbringing. I'm very passionate about God and what we're purposed on earth to do. I just know that I've encountered many who would be so much more of what he created if they just had some things, kind of light bulbs go off, and some okays. You're okay over here, or you're all right, just keep going. It's weird, but it's okay, and I
Yeah.
think that's the problem with most of what's happening. For such a big, vast God, to think that we could really know every way that He's
Yeah.
designed is a
Yeah.
very unfortunate limitation. Like in that, when I wrote that out, I sat there, and even in that, I was scared to write
Mm.
this on paper because I was concerned of how, if my family heard it, or if
Yeah.
someone in my church that didn't agree with that heard it, or I found myself making all of these, like, I have all these restrictions that I want to make okay with me.
Yeah. Right.
And everyday spirituality requires us, everyday walk with God, everyday exploration of, you have to be okay with the steps. You have to be okay with the most minute thing.
Yeah.
And you have to be okay that he did it. Like, yes, I do believe that there is an enemy to him. I
Mm-hmm.
believe that there is an antagonistic aspect of this life. But I also really believe that greater is he.
Yeah.
So
The
don't have
power of
people,
love is bigger than the power of
yeah,
hate. Yeah. Right.
let God be God.
Yeah. I think you're right that a lot of times we get caught with too small of an image of God, and we don't leave room for who God really is and how open God is to meeting us where we are and helping
Right.
us grow and learn.
So true. Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there anything else you wanted to tell me today?
Um, I would say one area that I like to share with people is the aspect of these songs, the aspect of lyrics, the aspect of I do like the phrase music soothes the savage beast.
Mm, okay. Yeah.
And one of the things that I've always dreamed of doing, unfortunately, I have not touched it. I just wrote it out. I used to call it the soundtrack of my life.
Oh,
So
cool.
I believe in creating playlists for every emotion. I
That's
believe
really
in
cool.
creating playlists for every frustration. I have a playlist called Fight of My Life. I have
Okay.
a playlist called Parlaxation. I have a playlist for walking. I have a I have a playlist for many things because one of the more exciting things that I have come into knowledge of is that when you create, my brother Tyrone used to create playlists for church so
Okay.
that when the musicians were not available to come to church, that we would still have the right sounds for the experience.
Okay.
So he was the first person I ever watched that when an album would come out, I'm aging. I said when an album. I was born in '76. That's inevitable. Um, um, when an album would come out, and he wanted to make it like it was a mixtape. He would go ahead and take different songs. We would have the double cassette player, and he would do a fast cassette and a slow cassette because he wanted to make sure there was no interference with the experience because you got so excited in church music and then all of a sudden a slow one would come on and destroy the moment because now you can't have
Wow.
praise anymore, you got to cut it down. So he's the reason why in my mind I always want to create things that can support the environment, support the experience. um
Right.
spot so I it sounds so simple, but it can be very much so a very heavy experience when you can create soundtracks for your life.
Yeah.
So in the
I love that.
morning, soundtracks, songs that maybe sound. There are certain songs that support cleaning day.
Okay. Definitely.
There, like the truth. There's certain sounds that support me cooking, certain types of cooking. There's certain sounds that support me, like when I'm not feeling well. It just depends on the songs, and so I create soundtracks. I
Oh, I love
create
that.
these
And
things to help.
that's a really accessible thing that even if we
Yeah,
can't make music, we could make a soundtrack of music that could
it's
really
true.
help somebody in their daily life. I love that.
You know where another area that was very, I'm telling you, this playlist thing became so passionate for me. Um, and I remember when Grey's Anatomy first came out.
Uh-huh.
Grey's Anatomy introduced me to the independent artists that they gave voice to.
Yes, yes.
It was amazing. And
That was really
so it was
yes.
just so
Yeah, and
exciting.
every episode a song title or something? That the title of each episode. So
Yes.
yeah, that's a really,
And
really
so they got it.
interesting thing.
I don't know if it was with them that it started, but it was all of a sudden they began to put them up on websites. So, there was different sites. I mean, obviously there's Shazam, but they literally started putting the little playlist of that episode on
Okay.
on websites. So now episode 5, I love that music. You could go to episode 5 and it would be in the order of the way it was
Oh,
played in the
really?
episode. So I brought that up
It's
because I
fun.
think a lot of times we don't realize what's drawing us in.
Right.
We don't
That's true.
realize that sound that is just doing all of the work for connecting the dots with the moment, the scene, the
Yeah.
emotion, the tragedy, the joy. That when they do the acting, and this is why I think people don't talk enough about what actors are doing, because
Yeah.
actors, they're not doing it to the music. The music comes because of
That's
the
true.
actors.
That's true. Right, right. And so we're getting the emotion from the music, but they're just dealing with the quiet and making it. Yeah, that's
They
really
have to present something for the music to attach to without the inspiration of the music.
good. That's really neat. Yeah.
So
That's a cool
I,
job.
right. I've been sitting there like, oh, I want to create a playlist for that. But I'm
Yeah.
just so intrigued by playlists and soundtracks and things that support your day. And I think for people who listen to this, if you don't do a playlist, take a moment and try it. Try to
Yeah.
put together a few songs, and you'll see just how different it changes the experience.
Hmm.
Even if you're not one for going out or doing anything, and you can do this with any style of music.
That's
And
really
that's the
fun.
other joy, because I don't stick with just gospel or just contemporary Christian or just jazz. I am now I think I've listened to everything from every generation. Just 3 days ago, I went on this binge, oh my God, of Joni Mitchell.
Oh, Joni Mitchell. Yeah.
Now you see why that thing that I
Yeah.
wrote, that came out so quickly
Yes.
after I finished, spending the day with her. She
Mm-hmm.
literally helped me she really helped me to shape how not to judge what
Yeah.
I'm feeling.
Yes.
Because I listen to music that's, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus.
Right.
She's like, no, I'm just gonna paint a picture.
Yeah.
Whatever it means to you is what it means to you, but this is what I'm presenting. And she became a little icon of unabandoned artistry.
Mm.
And I watched her as an old woman. I was watching her as a on her doing when they were honoring her. I can't remember where that was, but they were honoring her on something, and there's a big theater and it's full of people. And I'm literally was getting emotional because I'm like, she never imagined this is where she was just doing it.
Right.
And at one point in her documentary, she said these words. She says, I realized I had to do it because my mother and grandmother didn't have the freedom to do this. I have to do it to break kind of that cycle of the,
That mold.
not being
Mm.
and, with the risk of so much. She's, and I know a lot of artists had like in late or much or later years coming into knowledge of her. And I know for me, I came in knowledge of her in my late 20s. It wasn't
Okay.
even that early on. Again, as a church girl, that's so far fetched from gospel music. It has nothing to do with anything unless she's in a movie. But as a grown woman and a strong desire to be exactly who God wanted me to be, that's an ongoing journey that I want to attach to people who have found a way to allow all of this to just come out.
I love that what you're saying about your companions for the journey don't have to be the people that you're walking through life with. They can be people
That's
that you
excellent.
find along the way. I love that imagery because it just broadens who can matter in our lives. It doesn't have to be the people that are walking down the street with us. But yeah.
Because we're recording this during a time where there's no opportunity. So
Right.
you have to be open. The everyday spiritual experience has to be open. It has to be without walls.
Yeah.
It's not without morals. It's not without, it's too extreme what we're doing to ourselves to hold back this natural expression.
Yeah.
We're too nervous. We're too involved in this whole wanting to be in control and wanting to be careful. I don't want to do too much. And we haven't touched it. We
Yeah.
haven't even gone anywhere near the expansive amount of what God has birthed in this earth.
Mm.
We have not even, like in Pentecostal church, you always hear the quote, and it could be probably another, but my experience was Pentecostal: eyes have not seen and ears have not heard the things that God has prepared. If that is in fact true, that should be the reason why you don't put limitations.
Yes. Yes.
And unfortunately, religious practices does the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So my goal is not to do away with religious practices. My goal is to bring about a less restricted experience of
Right.
a very unrestricted God.
I love that. Yeah. Broadening definitions and opening minds and hearts to how God can work.
Yeah,
That's really powerful. Thank you.
you're welcome. I thank
Thank
you
you.
because it's just so important. And I find myself always saying, well, I'm 45 now. Where I'm 45 now. But I'm also, I have friendships now with one of my favorites, Catherine Russell.
Mm-hmm.
And she said to me, she says, oh, you're a baby. She says, imagine what you're like in 20 years. But I don't think like that because 45 is where I am. So I have to be connected to a 60-something-year-old to
Yeah.
get perspective.
Right.
Imagine if I only stayed friends with all 45-year-olds or 40-year-olds or whatever,
Yeah.
it would keep me in that mindset of I gotta hurry up and do this because I'm too old to be not doing this. And then you meet a 6-year-old and they're like, you're 20 years younger than me. You have all the time in the world. And so that's, even in relationships, you just have to have this open and expanded environment of influence.
That's
And
great.
don't fear that it's gonna produce a negativity. I trust God too much
Mhm. That's
to
wonderful.
judge. I'm just working really hard on giving him the credit that he gave me what I needed,
Mm,
and I'm okay. I'm just working really hard on giving God credit for why I think the way I do, and to give him the respect to explore it.
that's awesome.
So that's the last part of me that I wanted to share.
Thank you so much for sharing so much of your journey, and it's been really inspiring to hear. I'm really grateful for this conversation.
Awesome. Thank
It,
you.
so if people want to find you, Teresa, or hear more about you or your music, or where could they reach out? Where could they find you online?
I am definitely on Instagram. In a hilarious way, you can just find me Tabreeca_jazz. Very simple.
Okay.
I
Okay.
keep it
That's
so
great.
simple because no one has my name. My name is made up by my family. It's all the initials of my family, first name.
Oh, really? I never knew
Tyrone,
that.
Tyrone, Antoinette, Bernard, Regina, Eva, Eggleton, Charmise, and then they added on the A.
Oh, wow.
So that's easy to use everywhere. So even on Facebook, it's just Tabreeca.
Okay.
And then my website, which is actually, by the time I think this airs, it'll be back up, www.tabreeca.com.
Okay.
It is
Wonderful.
available everywhere.
They gave you a great name.
Thank you. I
That's
appreciate that.
great.
I got used to it. It was annoying in the beginning, but
You get to spell it for everybody.
spell it. I have relatives that still call me wrong name, literal
Really?
relatives.
Uh,
hmm And
that's
then, of
cute.
course, as a kid, people find nicknames in there. So I've been called Tabreca, to breakfast, to Bubaka, to
That's so
brisket. I
funny.
mean, it goes on and on.
Well, thanks again for
You're
coming.
welcome.
This has been Everyday Spirituality from Connect Faith.